Dressed as a pilgrim, St. James himself encourages us with a hearty Bon Camino. Every day of our Camino begins with a croissant and dois cafés grandes com leche. First of many examples of street art in Portugal. We left Porto at 6:45. Needed some help following the yellow arrows, but found some very friendly people to guide us. At breakfast, the typical coffee, roll, ham and cheese in a little cafe. We found Porto and the suburbs lovely with concrete homes and lovely gardens. Walked about 8 miles and arrived in Muxia, Portugal, about 1 p.m. These roadside shrines are everywhere along the Camino. On the way to Muxia de Porto. On day 2, we had another early start, walked on cobblestones and crossed the medieval Ponte Zumero, which had kayakers and people watching, along with music sponsored by politicians. For the first time, I felt I was being carried along and not just walking on my own back.
Não deixa nada no barco, porque senão já ficamos com ele. Ah, não deixa, não deixa. Eu já fui a correr, já tive que tomar.
Here is the first of many shrines to St. Anthony of Padua, who was actually a Franciscan friar from Portugal, much sought after for his preaching, kindness, and insight into Scripture. His statues are everywhere in Portugal. In the middle of this oak tree is a statue of St. Peter, who protected the village from a terrible fire in the 19th century. The tree is hundreds of years old.
Isto é Caminho de Santiago, tinha ali a seta, eu não sei. Bom caminho.
After miles of walking, we sat down under a tree to get out of the hot sun and have some lunch. A pilgrim happened to go by and said, "That man over there is trying to get your attention." Charlotte went over to him and received these huge tomatoes for our lunch, to which he said, "Bon Camino." Later on, we were thirsty, and we happened upon this little lemonade stand made with lemons from the lady's own garden. The sign said, "I do not want money. Free. Bon Camino." To arrive at our destination, Villa d'Arcos, we had to cross this beautiful medieval bridge, where we were met at the reception by a lovely hostess who showed us her collection of badges on the cape she wore while attending university. The tradition is that university students wear these on special occasions during the street time fairs and initiation of other students. After our Camino, we made a side trip to the university city of Coimbra, where we saw this initiation take place. The students have to dress up, carry around a turnip, which will sustain them during their ordeal. Black capes only, no badges. One of the oldest Romanesque churches in Portugal, São Pedro de Rates. St. Peter himself was much revered by the local people in the area and was reputedly ordained by St. James himself to assist in the evangelization of the peninsula. We stop for coffee, and who do we see? St. Anthony and St. John the Baptist. In Barcelos, the famous brightly colored cockerel has become a national symbol of Portugal and a logo for Portuguese tourism. The Barcelos cockerel is based on the same story that many have heard on the Camino Frances. There was a miraculous story of a roasted cock that rose from the table of a judge who had wrongly condemned a pilgrim to Santiago to hang from the nearby gallows, located south of the river. The pilgrim had proclaimed his innocence and stated that if he were wrongly condemned to hang, then a dead cock would rise from the judge's table in proof of his righteousness. The innocent lad was hanged, and sure enough, a roasted cock stood up on the judge's plate as they sat down for dinner that night. The bewildered judge hurried from his table to find the pilgrim alive on the gallows, saved by the miraculous intervention of St. James and the Barcelos cockerel. On this foggy morning, who do we see? An older woman using a scythe to mow food for her animals. Portugal is such a blend of the old and the new. Ponte de Tabuas. This medieval stone bridge replaced an earlier 12th century wooden bridge. Next to it is a little sandy beach where people can relax and go fishing. Estábulo de Valinhas. Here the vineyard had grapes which the owner made into her own wine, and provided a book for us to sign in our memories of the night, which concluded with an outdoor meal with people all around the table from Ireland, Germany, Belgium, Canada, and us, the USA.
Huh?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, to laugh
put
now.
right.
necessary.
And, I don't know what
I
is
believe
was
we're
it
having a
heißen
great
Fragen.
time.
Needle?
Needle and two
I'm just gonna clean this out.
You are, yeah.
No, I hide was.
In Ponte de Lima, our hotel was right next to the church whose bells rang for evening mass. Portugal really loves its poets. Here's a poem in Ponte de Lima about love and time, the eternal opponents. At Ponte de Lima, this bridge is lit up all night. It was calling us to walk over it as we set out on another day. More of the old and the new. In Porto, the street cleaners use blowers and little trucks to keep the streets spotless. Here a woman pushes her cart for the same purpose. Every pilgrim on the Camino, sooner or later, has some problems. We met people with blisters, a lost passport, those who suffered from the heat. Mine began on the steep hill going up to this beautiful overlook. When I saw this marker for an ancient Roman milestone, my problems had only increased as we walked over an actual medieval bridge. Every step was painful. Exploring La Fortaleza in Valencia, Portugal. They're in a supposing fortress in Tui, Spain. Spain and Portugal, of course, were enemies for centuries. This place guarded the northernmost place of Portugal. A typical Portuguese lunch in Valencias: fresh cooked seafood, white wine, salad, and fresh bread, never a day old. Crossing the bridge over the river Minho from Valencias, Portugal to Tui, Spain, I wonder what will await me today. Lots of time to think, lots of time to focus, lots of time to see what will be at the end of the bridge. Some Camino statistics. Over 260,000 pilgrims finished the Camino in 2015. But overall, 2.5 million people visit Santiago de Compestela a year. 54% of pilgrims are men. 28% are less than 30 years old. 16% are over 60 years old. 89% of all pilgrims walk the Camino. 10% cycle the Camino. 1,500 a year ride the Camino on a horse. 100 a year complete the Camino on a wheelchair. Suddenly, I don't feel so sorry for myself. Does this bridge crossing seem as if it will never end? So does the Camino. It can be very tedious and very long. Who are these pilgrims we meet? Almost half of all pilgrims on the Camino are Spanish, 48%, but over 130 nationalities complete the Camino. The next nationalities on the Camino are Italians, 16%, Germans, 13%, Portuguese, 10%, USA 9%, and French 8%. The country with the highest percentage of population that walk the Camino is Ireland. I'm noticing now how often I turn to the steel structure of the bridge in this filming. I have a little bit of vertigo, and I need some reassurance. Maybe we all do. What exactly is the Camino? It's the way of St. James, the name used to refer to all the routes to lead where the Apostle St. James the Great is said to be buried. The Camino has been one of the most important Christian pilgrimages for well over 1,000 years, has started a new international rebirth. It's a journey to the religious and historical roots of Europe. It's traveling through beautiful countryside and timeless villages. It's rediscovering the pleasure of being in direct contact with nature. But it's also an invitation to rediscover oneself through introspection and new encounters with people, to change habits that have been making one unhappy, to build unexpected friendships, and give oneself new challenges. But how do you get to Santiago? The most popular route by far, chosen by 70%, is the French way, which begins in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port in France and passes through Pamplona, Logroño, Burgos, Leon, and Astoria. The second most popular route is the Portuguese way, chosen by 15% of all pilgrims. We started in Porto. The northern way is followed by 15,000 people a year, 6%. The silver way, Via da Plata in the original way, Primitivo, by 8,000 people a year. And the English way, chosen by 7,000 people a year, 3%, on all other routes barely used at all. We did find one couple who had done the Camino several times, the last time from Seville to Santiago, 1,000 kilometers. At the end of the bridge were Charlotte and Stuart, a hiker from Australia, who helped me during my agony the last 4 kilometers uphill. I was very discouraged from all my back pain. Then we arrived in the Spanish city Oporto, where a week-long festival, Festas do Cristo, was just taking place. We just happened to stumble on this gigantic parade in honor of Jesus and his agony. We're in Galicia now. You will have noticed their blue flag. One of their characteristic instruments is the bagpipe. They have Celtic roots, which they showed to this stirring display during the Festas do Cristo. It was easily one of the emotional high points of my entire Camino. This is the faith in humanity part of my story. From Oporino, we had to take a cab to find our lodging for the night. It was so far out of town. I had inadvertently left my hiking poles in the cab. I really needed those poles to keep walking. About 10 o'clock at night, the owner of the lodging knocked on our door and said, "Here, I have something for you." The cab owner had returned with my hiking poles and left, not even needing a tip. What a great country. The Romans created a national highway throughout Portugal, which they called Via XIX. Here's an actual milestone from that road. Remember the Celtic roots of Galicia? Here's an actual Celtic-inspired bar. Boy, did that beer taste great. When we stayed in As Chivas, we found this old stone oven and a stone granary called Oreo. Then I had probably the best meal of the entire Camino, pulpo gallego. Ponte Sampaio, the handsome stone bridge over the Rio Verdugo, built in 1795 over earlier foundations. It was here that the local militia inflicted a significant rout on Napoleon's troops during the War of Independence, witnessed by a memorial at the far side. Who would know it today at the peaceful Café a Romana at the other side? ¿Atrapaste un pez? Creo que no. Hey, Charlotte, café? Pontevedra. At the heart of its modern suburbs is a delightful medieval core, the Zona Monumental, el Barrio Antiguo, entered by Rue Peregrina in Porto do Caminho. In the Praza de la Peregrina, we see the beautiful 18th century pilgrim chapel conceived by the architect Arturo Suto and built in the Baroque style to a floor plan in the shape of a scallop shell, symbol of St. James. Caldas de Reyes, we see the Igreja Paroquial Santo Tomás, dedicated to St. Thomas of Becket, Archbishop of Canterbury, who made the pilgrimage to Santiago 3 years before his assassination. I had to go in. For years, I've been reading about the pilgrimage of Canterbury to the tomb of St. Thomas of Becket, in which the wife of Bath recounts that she once went to Santiago de Compestela. That's what started it all in my imagination.
Oh boy. Oh, it
Sit
is.
down first.
Yeah. Oh boy. Caliente. Ah. Oh yes. It's slippery. That's hot.
In Caldas de Reyes, the fountain waters are 104 degrees year-round, a fact discovered by the Romans who built their spas here. We walked along the Rio Umia, where we saw outdoor sculpture and whimsical street art. In Padrón, this botanical garden is a model for the rest of Galicia. It also showcases one of their famous poets, Macias, who was born in Padrón. In the botanical park, we saw this giant California sequoia that framed the statue of the medieval Gallego poet Macias, Cativo de minha tristura. Padrón is also the birthplace of Galicia's most famous poet, Rosalía de Castro, who lived, worked, and died here. Happy the one who dreaming dies. Unfortunate the one who dies without dreaming.
mais cariñosa que o teu rostro reluz. las neves da montaña, nin fulgor da mañanciña. Con quen tei de comparar miña Santa Margarida, senti po chancel de amore polos anxes escollida. Solo a virxe máis hermosa que eres ti, bendita santa, e o teu rostro peregrino, o temido de mo espanta. De ti vivo namorada, en ti penso con fervore, que eu ben sei que che contenta este puro e santo amore. Quen poidera xunto a ti vivir segura. Manantial que me derrama, pura fonte de ternura. Onde a ti lonxe do mundo tan feliz me acobexara, quen xamais o prazer vano este meu mirar tornara. Que non monte un gran dimoras, tan bon aire se respira, que o que máis do mundo foxe, solo ali por Dios suspira. Miña Santa Margarida, miña Margarida Santa, dende esa casa no monte, donde o paxariño canta. Miña Santa Margarida, miña Margarida Santa, dende esa casa no monte, donde o paxariño canta.
Here's a third major writer from Padrón, Spain. Born in Padrón, Camilo José Cela was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1989 for a rich and intensive prose, with which restrained compassion forms a challenging vision of man's vulnerability. Why am I here? Why am I climbing all these steps? In the book A Pilgrim's Guide to the Camino Portugues, John Brierley notes that Monte Santiaguino was the place where St. James first preached the gospel on the Iberian Peninsula, thus initiating the entire Santiago story. This is where it all began. I'm doing it, but it's not a picnic, believe me. I am glad Charlotte is pulling me along to the top.
What do we see on top?
A view
Oh,
where St. James preached the gospel for the first time. We're wet, we might as well continue.
well, I don't want to get sopping.
Well,
This will never dry out. I mean, it's so stupid.
it's okay. It's good, it's good.
I know, because St. James was here, yeah.
The stone steps are getting a little slick. It's going to be real interesting going down. Who needs a gym membership? Actually, I do.
See, couldn't he preach like below? Did he have to go all the way up here?
The mountaintop is closer to God. No doubt he remembered the Sermon on the Mount. I wonder if he drove up. Yes, this is off the Camino, but without this mountaintop, the Camino wouldn't even exist. Padrone comes from the word for stone. When St. James was traveling by ship to what is now Galicia, the captain of the ship was looking for something to tie up his ship. He found a stone, and here it is. We made it! This is the view from our hotel in Santiago de Compestela. There's the cathedral. Earlier in the day, we visited the Museum of the Pilgrimage in Santiago and heard Canto de Ultreya, played by Resonet. Rosalia again, this time a festival, selling her books of poetry and celebrating her legacy today in Galicia. After the struggles of the Camino, we took a bus to Muxia on the Spanish coast to put everything together that we had experienced. In Muxia, there is a legend that if a person walks around or goes under this stone 9 times, she will be cured of rheumatism and arthritis. The stone is the petrified sail on the boat the Virgin Mary took to console St. James in his ministry.
Três. Quatro. Cinco.
Sí, eu passei pelo...
Seis.
Pasa, senhor. Já passamos. Eu vou passar outra vez hoje. Aguanta que eu vou passar outra vez.
Siete.
Passa-se por debaixo dela e... Uma vez. Se queira, pero impare. Impare.
Tu passaste uma vez só?
Eu passei uma bastante.
Ocho.
9, tem que ser impare.
Tem que ser impare. Sim, ou 3. Uma.
Nueva. La última vez.
Paquita! Paquita!
Mira, si fueras por la libertad, yo, no sé yo. Ay, no me
Bravo, parabéns.
This little cafe in Muxia has a lot of history in it. Money from travelers around the world who left them as souvenirs, a cross memorializing St. James, and a picture of the Enterprise, the ship that caused the greatest ecological disaster in Portuguese history. On a walk outside of Muxia, we saw one of the few swimmable beaches in northern Spain. What a gorgeous place. I asked an old resident if these fish drying racks were still in use. He assured me that they were. It was the natural way of preserving fish to sell and to survive on during the long winters. In Muxia, this memorial looks outward toward the sea, where many people died in shipwrecks. Memorial remembers those heroic villagers who helped to save those whose ships were breaking apart in the violent surf. In Muxia, my meal of pimentos de padrón. Some are spicy and hidden in the pile. Pimentos de padrón, unos son picantes y otros no. To all the people on our Camino who helped us with random acts of kindness, we salute.
The lady in Porto who leaned out of her window to guide us as we got lost on day one.
The gardener in Maya who gave us 2 huge tomatoes from his garden for the Camino.
The lady in Maya who laid out fresh lemons, water, sugar, cups and spoons at her unattended roadside lemonade stand with her sign, "I accept no money, gratis, de graça."
The construction worker in Barcelos who left his worksite to point out the way to the river. Atrás!
The policeman in Caldas de Reis who guided us to our hotel.
The taxi driver in O Porrinho who returned with my missing hiking poles and left without waiting for a tip.
The young lady at Hotel Merceria in Ponte de Lima who prepared us breakfast at 6:30 in the morning so that we could leave early.
The cafe owner in Mamire who cracked walnuts by smashing his index finger over them with his fist and then offering them to me without a single word.
The owner of Estábulo de Valinhas who prepared a huge meal for 9 pilgrims and set up the table outside for us and served us with white wine made from grapes in our backyard vineyard.
A fellow pilgrim, Stuart from Australia, who encouraged me in the painful uphill 4 kilometers to our lodging of the day, Casa de Capella.
Sean from Ireland and Meinhardt from Germany, whom we met at Estábulo de Valinhas and who suggested the post-Camino stop in Muxia.
The troop of 100 Spanish soldiers on patrol on the Camino itself, who wished us a heartfelt Buen Camino.
And all the fellow pilgrims, villagers, bar owners, and countless random pedestrians who wished us Bon Camino.
I love you all.
Me too.
notas ali, sabe? Aí pegou aqui pra guiar. Acho que isto é Caminho de Santiago, tinha ali a seta, eu não sei. Bom caminho.
For those going on the Camino, we wish you a memorable journey. It is truly your Camino.